declare this agenda forum open. I welcome everyone here in chambers and anyone viewing at home. Item 1 is the opening acknowledgement. The City of Swan acknowledges traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters, their culture and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and their descendants. Agenda forums are specifically for agenda items which are to be considered by Council at their next ordinary Council meeting. Agenda forums are not decision-making forums. They provide an opportunity for councillors to be equally informed and seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of such matters at the next ordinary council meeting to make a formal decision and consideration. Item 2 is the disclaimer. Terms and conditions of entry into the meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery. Members of the public gallery are requested to read them prior to attending in the gallery and abide by them. Item 3, attendance and apologies. I have Councillor Knight on an approved leave of absence. He's on approved leave of absence. Councillor Parry is an apology tonight. Other than those two, all councillors are present. Item 4, declarations of financial proximity or interest affecting impartiality. Are there any councillors or staff? No, that takes it to...
Just a question.
Question, Councillor Johnson.
So yeah, it seems to be indicating that I've got one, have I?
Sorry?
Through the Chair, if I could, your ongoing financial interest in the matter involving the land disposal is still there?
I did look through the agenda, but I didn't see it. Which agenda item is it?
Disposal to Gilberts of land is still there? Unless I've misread the agenda, it's not.
Yeah, I did look through it because there's an awful lot of disposal of land, but I didn't see that particular one. I thought it was Lot 811, which my understanding was the Lifestyle Village. Yep. There was purchase of land, which I think is from the, I'm allowed to say, some residents, and there was disposal of land. I'll check the agenda.
Thank you. Item 5, public question time. Questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. At 5.1, there is no questions received on notice. 5.2, questions without notice. Are there any questions from members in the public gallery about any agenda item tonight? This is questions. Being no questions, we'll move on to item 6, reports and notices of motion. And 6.1, additional information from officers. There are nil. Item 6.2, deputations. In accordance with our current procedures for public participation at agenda forums, all requests for in-person deputations were required by 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 5th of July, and all written deputations received by 3 p.m. on Tuesday, the 4th of July, were circulated with the preliminary agenda. One came in today or after the 3 p.m. It's attached to the end of your run sheet, and it's from Ting Sia in relation to the Telstra communication structure in Beachborough, item 4.3, so you can read that at the end of the meeting. Thank you, councillors. In Part A, we have item 13.1, making of meeting procedures local law, and I have one in-person deputation from Ms Miralina Stempful. Miralina here, thank you. Once you turn your microphone on, you'll have 5 minutes to make your deputation, and I'll try and tell you when you have 1 minute left if you need that time.
Yeah, it should be
Thank you.
less than that. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So, I have been hearing about the changes proposed for the City of Swan meetings procedure for quite a while, specifically in relation to what is proposed in terms of deputation and debating times. To be honest, I have resisted getting involved in this simply because I have learned that what we as citizens say in this chamber makes a small impact on the decision-making process. I was told many times by many of you that what matters in these councils are numbers, and that decisions on how to vote are already made well in advance of us coming here, using the only option that we have to sway your voting our ways. So really, if everything is already decided up front, why do we even bother to come here? Well, I'll tell you why. These deputations are our only true opportunity to talk to all of you at the same time, all of you councillors in this chamber, to provide you with some different perspective, to give you the opportunity to listen from constituents, including those that are outside of your world, outside of your think tanks, outside of your normal circles or of influencers, away from those whom you meet at private functions behind closed doors without time limits. These deputations are our only chance that we, as little people, have to bring value add to the Council, to be heard. This is our only chance to give you a different perspective, provide you with some food for thoughts that taste differently. Complex issues need time to be explained. Details need to be communicated. 5 minutes is all we have, and we want to keep those 5 minutes. We want you councillors to have unrestricted debates on matters of importance to us. It is not fair to shut us up, and it is counterproductive to stifle exchange of ideas. I have also have issues with the 3 for and 3 against deputation rule. Why do you think it is appropriate to have an equal number of for and against deputations for a given issue? By doing so, you will promote the impression that the public is equally split across a given issue, when in reality the balance could be very different. This role will distort reality. If you really want to do it right, the number of pro and cons contributions should be proportional to the general sentiment of the submissions, not some arbitrary 50-50 split. Lastly, I would say that in order for this Council to function in a democratic and transparent way and represent the citizens of this city, debate and deputation should be promoted and not stifled. There must be a meaningful dialogue between you councillors and between you and us, the people you ultimately work for. Changing the rules of engagement along the lines proposed does not speak to this. And while it may allow you to go home 30 minutes ahead of time, you would leave this chamber with less understanding of what we want and need, and less opportunity for reflection. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next item is item 4.1, proposed amendment to number 217 local planning scheme number 17, which affects the boundaries in a special use zone as a result of MRS Amendment 1396 of 57 north western portion of Rose Hill Waters, and I have Mr. Craig Ben Porth. Thank you, Craig. You'll have 5 minutes, and I'll try and tell you when you have 1 minute left.
Good evening. Thanks very much. Representing the South Guildford Community Association, we're against the proposal for Council to accept Roseville Waters' request for the Council to accept proposal amendment number 217 as a basic amendment. The reason for the amendment to be accepted as basic claims Perth Airports endorsed the change from rural to urban, when in fact they were one of the numerous objecting parties to the rezoning. The rezoning is completely based on assumed noise reductions. The developer's own noise tests confirm the original contours, and no subsequent noise tests have been done to confirm the theoretical lower noises. In our objection to WAPC, we simply asked for new noise tests to be considered before making such a large decision. Even the WAPC have set criteria for zoning according to noise levels. Their decision for rezoning is entirely based on incorrect theoretical noise contours against the advice of Perth Airports who produced them. We requested that accurate tests be done prior to the rezoning, but this was not done. Building residential homes in high noise zones is not acceptable by WAPC, but yet they have not taken the necessary steps to check and prevent this. Perth Airports have stated the noise contours are not accurate and that they cannot endorse the exchange, as they know the noise levels are higher than what is shown and are forecast to increase even further. In the initial application, the developer was required to submit noise tests, which showed the noise contours were correct. The developer could have supplied new noise level tests, however the tests would show high levels, so these have not been submitted. Instead, he simply claims the theoretical levels to achieve his own objective. WAPC did not address or answer these questions, nor did they take the advice and recommendations from Perth Airport's objections, nor did they request a noise test over a few months to make sure the rezoning is justified and correct. We ask the council to be responsible, logical and fair in ensuring things get done properly and in the correct manner. This starts by objecting to the motion being accepted as a basic amendment. A couple of other interesting points is no development was meant to commence on stage 4 until Main Roads had a suitable solution to Queen's Road intersection. There is still no solution. In fact, the new markings are just as dangerous and congestion even worse. The land now proposed to be developed is where the initial bore was going to be established, where the removed stables were, and where a large number of trees have been removed or conveniently died in the last few years. The developer claims only 13 extra plots were gained as a result of the land swap. This was for land in Zone 2 with non-acceptable noise levels and in the floodplain, completely undevelopable, in exchange for prime raised land overlooking the reserve, and even 13 plots is worth over $5 million. In reality, the proposed plots have increased from 70 to 140, an increase in value of about 25 million to the developer and an increase in traffic problems and resources that are not available. This land swap and rezoning has granted the developer an enormous financial gain. Votes for the rezoning and land swap have been based on pretty presentations and promises of bars, restaurants and facilities that the developer cannot guarantee, and not on facts issues surrounding the exchange. Please assist us in ensuring things get done correctly and ethically. Maybe the developer can start by paying for the traffic lights to be installed from all the financial benefit given to him. This would also help in the community with a safe option for crossing the street and prevent the need for fixing a bridge underpass. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next item, council, is item 4.3. It's the SAT request to reconsider the refusal of proposed telecommunications infrastructure in Sacramento Beach Borough. On the rear of your run sheet, there is a written deputation. Did you have a question, Councillor Bowman? Thank you. Item 5.2, petition response, parking at Woodbridge Riverside Park, with 3 people registered for in-person deputation, and the first is Katrina Elmer Gray. Thank you. Once again, you'll have 5 minutes, and I'll try and tell you when you have a minute left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's actually Catherine Elmer Gray. It must have taken my nickname Cat and changed it to Katrina. As most of you will probably remember, I was here in November 2021 after raising serious concerns around the misuse of Acrod Bays in our shire. I spent the last almost 2 years working with councillors and the City of Swan staff, and recently we've had some fantastic work happening with the rangers and enforcement of misuse. I woke up earlier this week being tagged multiple times in posts around the Riverside Park. We call it the Pirate Park because there was a pirate ship down there originally, and my disabled children love it, as do their friends. This is one of very, very few fully accessible playgrounds. There is one other in Whiteman Park in our area. We have held multiple birthdays here with a child in a wheelchair. Often his friends in wheelchairs need to come too. 8 bays might seem like a lot when you have 200 plus park runners. However, when you have 15 disabled children wanting to attend a birthday party, 8 is nowhere near enough. I understand that the council and staff have done some review and have stated that it is underutilised. Whenever I am there, every bay is full. I do understand that there is a massive need for increase of parking, so I want to make it clear that I absolutely agree with the need for more parking at this venue, but I am begging council and staff, do not take away Acrod Bays, as was a suggestion. I understand this is the cheapest option, but this will directly disadvantage disabled people like my son. And to be quite frank, as a ratepayer, I'm sick and tired of having to fight for the rights of disabled people in our community. I understand $135,000 for for an unsealed parking space seems like a lot, but I ask all of you councillors and City of Swan staff who are responsible for going ahead and making this decision. Have you ever had to take your child away from a playground and not even be able to attend because you can't safely get them out of the car? The mention is constantly, oh, well, people are parking on the curb. Well, those people parking on the curb can still take their children in. I cannot. If there is not an accessible bay available because 2 are taken away, my son and I have to go home. I'm sick and tired of seeing the heartbreak on my son's face when he cannot join in his community. He has a right to be here and he matters. Please, councillors and City of Swan staff, if any time in the future opportunity to remove Acrod bays comes up, don't discuss it. Our disabled people are struggling enough and they don't deserve to have to fight over and over again for equitable access to their community. It's not okay. I do not stand with that suggestion. Please look at alternative options. I'd like to thank the councillors who I have been in touch with and those who have helped me over the last 2 years get things moving. And I would also like to thank the CEO and council staff who have been working closely with me around the Acrod audit and enforcement. I really appreciate it and I hope that we can continue working to better improve access to our community for our disabled members. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. The next speaker is Brian Hunt. Thank you, Brian. Once again, you have 5 minutes and I'll try and tell you when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to speak on this item, and the previous speaker was touching on some important matters, I think. I think that what the council have got is a problem by virtue of the success of this park. I mean, this is world class and provides facilities for a range of people that people are utilising. And I don't have data that can demonstrate or not demonstrate whether the facts put forward in the staff report is accurate, but I do know that when you go there casually on a weekend, the car park is always full and there's always overflow areas. And it's when the overflow gets to be parked on the side of that steep entry street into the thing that the site gets potentially dangerous. And the staff's own data suggests that an additional 17 or so bays are required. And the opportunity exists for that at the far end of the park where an area has been identified. It's flat, it's got limestone base on it, it needs work, that's for sure, and it won't be the most convenient car park because of the shape of it, but if it will provide for a dozen more bays, plus some of the work that is already suggested, that seems to be a reasonable response to the data that you already have in front of you. And this is only going to get busier, believe me. And the facilities that you provide there are excellent. They need to be maintained and they need to be enhanced. And the opportunity exists in responding to this work that's been done, in responding to the numbers that the staff have identified as a shortfall. And that can be provided at the area that's been identified at the end of the park. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Brian. And the next speaker on the same item is Mr. Alan Moody. Thank you, Alan. Once again, you have 5 minutes and I'll tell you when you've had 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Alan Moody. My address is number 18 First Avenue. Press the button, Alan. My name is Alan Moody. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you. My address is 18 First Avenue in Woodbridge, and I'm here to talk against the officer's recommendation for the parking problem and the improvement thereof. The reason I say that is it's a fantastic venue. As you've seen, I've had a few birthdays. I get down there with my grandchildren, and I go on the Flying Fox as well. Congratulations, job well done. Beautiful. 36-acre river park, going to be developed more in the future, more people. Shall we catch shall we catch a train from Guildford to get there? Maybe. Anyway, there are some very, very serious things that I'd like to present to you. One of which, I have a 2-storey house there. I sit out in the veranda there and relax of an evening. And even during the daytime, you'll see that when it gets that busy, people park on the footpath because there's nowhere else. Then mum and dad and the kids wander down the roadway and they're in real serious danger of getting run over. Would councillors like to have that on their conscience? Yes or no? No. Okay. Well, it's very, very important and it may happen. What I'm suggesting, or what I'd like to do, and I plan to do, unless you tell me I can't or shouldn't, I'm going to hire some people with a drone. I'm going to video all of the adjoining streets around there. I'm going to do it at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning so you can see who lives there. I'll do it at 12 o'clock on a Saturday noon and Sunday. Then you can see how big the problem is. It is serious. The park is absolutely fantastic. We need to get some more parking, please. I think there's a recommendation of about 5 or 6 parking bays. That's about as useful as ashtrays on a motorbike. So please have a look at it. Thank you for taking the time to talk.
Thank you, Alan. That brings us to the end of deputations, so thank you everyone who participated. The next item is item 6.3, councillor questions regard to other items on the agenda. Councillor Bowman, you had a question?
I do, Mr Mayor. I've got a few, but I'll go back to the 4.3, was it? 4.1, sorry.
Yes?
The basic amendment. Can staff just explain a little bit more why it's basic and what would it need to change so it wasn't basic amendment?
Mr Russell?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A basic amendment is set out in criteria in the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme regulations, and they have 3 classes: complex, basic, or complex, standard and basic, and basic is the lowest, most simple category. And one of the criteria that qualifies an amendment to be classified as a basic amendment, a local planning scheme amendment to be classified as a basic amendment, is where it is an amendment that is occurring to bring an inconsistency with a region scheme, such as this instance here. Now, it is open for generally a proponent of an amendment to request that the West Australian Planning Commission arbitrate as to the proper classification of the amendment category. I'm not certain. I suppose it is open for someone to ask the Commission whether or not the amendment is a basic amendment or not. But look, it is open to the Council to, because it's part of the resolution, it is open for the Council to advance a resolution that it considers that the amendment is not a basic amendment. Presumably it's some other form of amendment, but you'll need to provide a reason as to which criterion in the other categories that it would fulfil in order to render it that type of category.
Further question, councillor Bowman? No, if I've asked if there are any other questions, so you've got the floor. Please ask any other questions now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's in item 2.2, the policy review, and in particular the election signage. Mr Mayor, can staff further elaborate on all the red parts that have been added?
Mr Bishop, when you're ready.
Because there seems to be some conflict.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Page 81, councillors. Thank you, Mr Bishop.
So, as per the agenda, and the attachment, there are some proposed amendments to the policy, which is highlighted in red. I'm not sure, is Councillor Bowman referring to the question around the size of the sign?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that'd be the first one.
So, within the attachment, Councillor Bowman and a couple of other councillors have also addressed with feedback that the maximum measurements for height and width are inconsistent with the maximum surface area that's referenced in the policy. It's been rounded up to 1.5 square metres, whereas if you take the maximum dimensions allowable in the draft policy, you can only actually get to 1.44 square metres. It's been rounded up a small amount. So we are proposing to amend the policy for next Wednesday night council meeting.
Mr Mayor, my next question is regarding 3.5. Can staff explain what the intent there is and what will be allowed or not be allowed? Is that going to be a management procedure as well, or is that simply repeating legislation currently that exists?
Again, through you, Mr Mayor, it is merely repeating what exists in other legislation. We do acknowledge that. It's simply that we are aware that when this policy goes out to candidates, they're looking for guidance as to what they can or cannot do, and the intent of that inclusion is to draw candidates' attention to the fact that there are other legislation that can restrict advertising and parking of vehicles with advertising on it. We have, in the last few elections, seen an increase in the use of vehicles for electoral advertising, and it was the intent of that is to draw candidates' attention to that. But of course, if council do not wish to have that in there, that can be removed.
So, Mr Mayor, follow-up question with that. My understanding is election signage on a vehicle is only a problem if you keep it stationary on a road or park it on the side of a road. If you're parked in a parking bay or something like that, there is not an issue. Can I just get clarification if that's what staff's understanding is?
Mr Bishop, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you again. Yes, that's correct. If it's a roadworthy vehicle and travelling on the road, that's fine. The issue is where it's parked for extended periods, or in periods where in locations where you're not allowed to park, or parked on verges without the consent of the owner opposite, variations of that. Also, we have the new parking local laws which council have adopted as well as the road traffic provisions. But certainly if council wants further clarification on that, we can provide that as well.
Mr Mayor, my next part is on 3.6, part 3, 4, 5 and 6. Is that going to be reviewed internally, because that's not a process that has previously been followed as per the policy?
Mr Bishop, thank you.
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, can I just have a repeat of which part of the draft policy that was? 3.6A. So through you, Mr Mayor, so 3.6A part 3. So that refers to the marking of signs. As per a question we've had from Councillor Bowman on this, he is correct. We don't always mark signs. What we found in practice is that by contacting candidates and requesting removal, that has been the preferred methodology. So we're also proposing, as part of this amendment for next Wednesday night, to change the wording to that, to may mark the sign, because it's not done in all situations. In fact, most of the time it's not done. Part
4.
So part 4 still applies. Part 5 still applies.
And 6. I think Councillor Bowman said part 6 as well.
Signs that are not removed following 3 days of election. That's correct. So that part 6 also still applies.
Thank you. Further question, Councillor Bowman?
Mr Mayor, my next is on 5.3. It's regarding the CSRFF funding. Am I correct that this hasn't previously been provided to council in the last 3 years as a council item?
Mr CEO?
I believe that's the case, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, my next question is, has this city in the last 3 years applied for CSRFF funding? And if so, have we been successful?
Through the chair, yes, the city has applied and has been successful, and we're constructing infrastructure in accordance with that funding.
And just a final question on that one. The requirement to come to council, my understanding is that's not a new requirement. It's been something that's been required for quite some time, which is what most local governments would normally do. Is that correct?
Mr CEO?
I can refer to 2 other local governments. So the City of Canning, we always put the CSRF applications to council for endorsement. City of Coburn, we didn't, but they're embodied in a document called an infrastructure plan, where council already previously adopted our priorities. So in the absence of having priorities, I've asked for staff to bring these matters to council.
Mr Mayor, my next question is on 5.4. In response to a question that I've asked, and staff, thank you for providing the response, said we can't identify the expenses of the traffic management because they were across different cost centres. Is that normal that we can't identify any expenses that go across cost centres, or it's just for this example?
Mr Jackson? Giacomino?
Yes, that Mr. Giacomino may comment on the issue of traffic management, but I would simply note it's not simply all engineering services that employ traffic management. We would for a variety of different, so an event program would have traffic management, engineering services have traffic management, emergencies would have traffic management. As to actually apportioning across cost centres, Mr. Giacomino, can you make a comment, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through our capital works delivery, it'll be across hundreds of programs, as well as our operation accounts will be across many operation accounts. So to portion it to exact account, the list will be quite lengthy. So as a result, you would see in the confidential attachment, we did break down the expenditure which we believe will come across the contract, but through the actual document in terms of the finance accounts, then that was not provided.
So am I right that we only used the one company? And if that's the case, could we not have done a dump on what we've actually used that company in previous years for to get that figure?
Mr. CEO?
So council is appointing a contractor for the delivery of the service across all of its programs. In this particular case, what the aggregation is to simply see whether you're operating within the tender threshold. As noted by Mr. Giacomino, when it comes to the individual apportionment, each time a contract is used, we apply the actual cost of that back to the particular project. So we do at the end of the project, but not prospectively. It's always a retrospective outcome.
Mr. Mayor, my next question is on C 1.1. Is there any additional information that's come about on this item from last time?
Mr. CEO or Ms. Hodgkin? It's the revocation motion of Councillor Parry.
Through the chair, not that I'm aware of, other than that there's a notice that's been lodged in accordance with meeting procedures.
And Mr. Mayor, are we changing the way we advise councillors of revocation motion? My understanding is once this revocation motion has been received, I thought councillors got told, however, I had to wait to the agenda to see that. Is that a change of process?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you. I'm not aware of an internal process that involves referral. It's simply processed in accordance with meeting procedures. But Ms. Hodgins, is there an internal process? Okay, so.
And Mr. Mayor, my final question regarding C 1.3, is it the normal process that we would actually identify the land requirement first before asking, and or is it a good opportunity to try and get land and then work out what we want to do with it?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you. As this is a notice of motion rather than the staff report, I can't comment on the individual approach that's been used. Simply to say that if a proposal is to be seriously entertained and properly entertained, I can attest to how hard it is to particularly work with the Department of Defence. The more research you do up front, the better the outcome longer term.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, you are next.
Yeah, I just got a
Excuse me.
question about.
I had my cell phone.
I know you may have pushed your button, Councillor Catalano, but Councillor Johnson indicated 3 or 4 minutes prior to you pushing your button. We haven't implemented, and I didn't say we were using the queuing system for tonight's meeting, so it's back to raising your hand. So I've got Councillor Bowman spoken, Councillor Johnson is next, followed by yourself, and then Councillor Henderson at this stage. Please proceed, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my question is about the election signs. On page 85, it says election signs must not be, bullet 3, be constructed of materials or installed in a manner that may have an adverse effect on the health, safety, or convenience of a person, traffic, or land. And I guess my question is that not potentially ambiguous and may lead to one councillor's signs being removed and not another's? So can we advise what kind of materials would have an adverse effect on the health, safety, or convenience of a person, and then we can go on to installation.
Mr. Bishop, if you can answer that question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. This is a clause that we've had in our policy around any health or safety hazard, as long as we've had the policy, as far as I can recall. It does inherently involve some subjectivity. The sort of examples are where there is obvious traffic hazards where there's projections of signage out into the road reserve, on roundabouts, visual distractions. That's why there's reference now to things like illuminated signage. We've had situations with like signage attached with like ribbons attached or flags. So yeah, it is a subjective call, but if it's believed in the officer's opinion to be presenting a particularly a road safety hazard. We also have had some signs placed on the footpath and situations of that nature.
But I guess my question then, isn't that covered by section 3.2? Signs on thoroughfares, it covers where you're allowed to put an election sign, and it's not in any way ambiguous. You know, it's quite precise, this section 3.2, whereas what we've just read is potentially going to lead to one councillor's signs being removed and not another. Would be my view. I mean, it needs to be a measurable criteria, an objective measurable criteria, not any criteria with subjectivity in it.
Mr Bishop?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you. Yes, 3.2 does give some very prescriptive scenarios which are deemed not acceptable and obviously very objective in the ability to measure against those. The previous clause is simply to catch any other situation that's considered an obvious hazard. It is correct to say that it's rare, it doesn't get applied very often. I'm not aware of complaints of any signage ever being removed under that provision that hasn't been agreed with was inappropriate in its location. The officer's recommendation is to have that preceding clause just to catch any other situations, even though they may be rare.
Okay, through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Bishop, you seem to be saying that be constructed of materials are installed in a manner clause has previously been in there, but it's marked as read as being something that's new.
Mr Bishop?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just to clarify, yeah, the any sort of kind of hazard type of range, health or safety hazard, has been there. It's been in, what the amendment has been, from recollection, around the addition of materials, reflective materials, things of that nature. So that's the amendment from recollection.
Thank you. Councillor Catalano, you're next. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. On page 137, that's 4.2, that's the Whiteman Screen Production Facility. It says that the purpose is public purposes, special uses reservation. My question is, why is it public purpose? Why is it public purpose?
Mr Vanderlyn, thank you.
Mr Mayor, through you, I just want to make sure on which page, councillor, you're referring to, because there could be, is it?
Page 137.
So you're referring to the fact that it's public purpose under the MRS?
Well, that's what...
yeah, okay, so the reason for that is the land is owned by government, and it's a government facility that they're going to facilitate on that land.
Okay, so why then does it refer to private, market-driven, and the private sector? And I mean, who's actually building this facility?
Mr Vanderlyn.
Mr Mayor, this is a proposal through the private sector to government on government land, facilitated by Department of Finance and Parliament, and that is what that refers to. So the application is by the private sector to government to develop the land, and as you know, the development application for that has already been approved. So this is government bringing in the MRS in line with the proposal for the site.
Okay, so who's actually building it, the facility?
So the facility is developed by the private sector on government land.
Okay, so a private company is building a facility, a big shed, on government land for private use, and I guess for profit as well. And that's still considered to be public purpose? Why?
That is how they've
Yeah, I know,
determined
but do you know why? Because if you look at the definition, it, says, the general things like hospitals and high schools and universities and, all these other things. But how does this get to be a public purpose when
That
it's not
will-
a government facility?
That detail will be in the contract between the developer and government, which we don't have the detail of. So we'll have to get that detail if or ask if we can get hold
Okay,
of it.
would you be able to do that by the next meeting?
I'll take that on notice
Yeah,
and see
thank
if I
you,
can get
because
more detail about that.
I'm not able to understand how this is basically a government, because it appears that in the definition, public purpose is about government or institutional kinds of buildings and uses, and I don't see how this can be that if it's private facility for profit, even though it might be on government land.
I think
So,
dot point
clarify, that'd be
five,
great,
the key
thank you.
issues, answer that question, councillor Catalano.
Well, you're talking about the fact that it's going to be used for the film industry, promoting film industry, but the point is it's not actually a government institution or a government entity that's building it. So how does that fit in with
Well,
public purpose?
It says in part of dot point five under the key issues, the development of a screen production facility is compatible with the general intent of PCA 174, in particular the civic and cultural amenity use, refer to attachment 3 of the planning control area of 174. So, but I'm sure Mr Van der Linde will follow up and
Oh,
provide a more
great, thank you for
detailed
that,
answer.
yes, thank you.
Any more questions, councillor Catalano? Councillor Henderson, you are next.
Thank you, Mayor. In regard to 2.2, I haven't heard anyone saying they're going to withdraw it. And then if someone hasn't, I'll be withdrawing to make some significant changes. Some of those questions have been answered tonight, but there are others outstanding. Excuse me. In regard to 4.2, again, unless someone's withdrawn it, I'll be moving to oppose the recommendation. That's all from me.
Thank you, and I'll just make the general comment. Letting us know of an intent tonight is one thing, but you need to get your alternatives in. I suggest you check with the appropriate staff, whichever item it is, and because it's not in your ward, the policy review is the general one, so the first motions in, alternatives in, well, that's the order I'll take them in. Councillor Howlett, you're next.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is in relation to item 5.5, the Beach Bar All Abilities Play Space. I note that the key issues listed, point 3 of the key issues is that one of the impacts of attracting high visitors can be traffic and the problems with that. Yet staff have gone on to recommend Hull Park, and when we look at the details, Hull Park is the only out of the 3 parks listed that has a disadvantage listed as increased traffic. So my question is, why have staff identified a key issue as being traffic and then selected a park which has a disadvantage of increased traffic? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Jekyllina.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So Hull Park definitely does have traffic as one of the considerations. With Hull Park, though, there is the Brockman Community Centre, which has already built car park through there. So there is already arranged traffic which vehicles will attend, and there is that facility for traffic to park through there. So having that existing facility would be a benefit in terms of, I guess, vehicles already utilise that intersection and those access points. So yes, it is a consideration to be made, but we are confident that on that site, if that was to progress, the traffic would still be able to operate safely at that site.
Any other questions, councillors? Then that takes us to the confidential item, so I'm looking for a motion to go behind closed doors. Moved Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Congdon. Is there anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that carried. I thank the members in the public gallery for staying. And once the doors are locked and we're off live streaming, the next item will be item C 3.3, and I'll just wait for the
no invitation afforded to the councillors to ask questions of the deputies earlier, and I'm wondering, is this a change in format, or was that just an error in proceedings?
Well, I don't think it was an error in proceedings. I didn't see any councillors raise their hand to ask any questions. In fact, at one stage I did ask Councillor Bowman, and then he stated he wanted to ask questions of staff. But no one raised their hand to ask any of the deputies a question. I waited a few moments and then I'll ask the next deputation to come forward.
Thank you, but in my recollection, it's frequently there's an invitation. Does any councillors have any questions of the deputies this evening? Because I didn't hear that, I didn't put my hand up. So I suppose some consistency if we're going to be asking councillors to put their hands up or not put their hands up, to ask.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I do believe you did ask at the confidential deputy, you did ask after that, deputy, does anybody have any questions, any councillors? So in that instance, you did make that invitation, but you didn't earlier
Only
this
because
evening.
Councillor Bowman had already indicated, and I didn't know whether he had a question of the deputy or of staff, and he later clarified it was staff. So I'm sure everyone around this chamber, if they want to ask a question, they just put their hand up, because I don't know what you're going to ask, or you might be doing something different. So the usual format is, if you want to ask a question of anyone, you put your hand up and I'll ask you. Okay, that takes us to closure. So thank you everyone for your attendance, and I declare this agenda forum closed at 6:56. Thank you.